Welcome to your new favorite podcast, Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks, with your hosts,
Monica.
Susan. Welcome, everybody, to your favorite podcast. You've been waiting for us, the Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks. I'm Susan.
I'm Monica.
And we are your hostesses. Your hostess? Your hostess?
Oh, I think I like hostesses better.
Hostesses.
Hosti sounds like a worm or something.
It does actually sound like a worm.
Yeah, let's not.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
We're just your hosts.
There you go.
Today we have a, I don't even know how to say what we have today, but we have a National Historic Site we're going to talk about. And Monica and I have both talked about, like, how would we introduce this topic, because it's a bit of a somber topic.
It's a somber topic, but we both agreed that it's something that needs to be brought to our audience and just kind of to use as a reminder, I guess, of things that have happened in the past that we're hopefully not going to recreate in the future.
This is the hope that we learn from our past.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the place that we're going to cover, it's a National Park Service unit. It is called Minidoka National Historic Site. In 2001, it was first established as a national monument. It eventually became a National Historic Site when they added on Bainbridge Island Japanese Exclusion Memorial, because both of them concerned the forcible removal of the Japanese Americans into these camps.
Concentration camps.
Yeah, so like we said, it's you know, you think about some of our other podcasts, very fun, uplifting, and lively. And Monica and I both, you know, as we went through studying and looking at this stuff, and I've been to Minidoka, once you go there, you know, everything changes when you've actually visited a place. It becomes even more real. And this is that kind of place.
I've never been there, but I have recently read a couple of books about not Minidoka, but about everything that was going on at that time.
Yeah.
And they're sobering books, and they make me sad.
They make me sad. Make
Yeah.
me angry.
Angry, yeah.
And Minidoka, just to kind of set the setting here, is it's located in Idaho. It's located maybe a half hour's drive northeast out of Twin Falls, Idaho. But it is literally in the middle of not a whole lot. Like, driving there really isn't a whole lot on the way. It's just a bunch of fields. It's and maybe because I went probably during more of the winter time. It was in March, but it was really windy. It was really windy there, but there is not a whole lot that is out there in that land.
Yeah. And, you know, typically places that are out in the middle of big fields and lands that have nothing to break the wind.
Yeah.
I imagine it's not pleasant.
Yeah, it was not pleasant. So this National Historic Site is recognized because after when World War II, when we declared war on Japan, after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, when we declared war, almost immediately, the United States took measures to forcibly remove Japanese Americans from their homes on the West Coast. And when I say West Coast, it's literally the West Coast, the entire West Coast, and also goes into Arizona. Forcibly removed...
And Hawaii.
Yeah, and Hawaii. And forcibly remove these folks from their home, from their lives, from their businesses, from everything, because they were suspected of being spies.
Yeah.
Forcibly removed. So Bainbridge Island, they maybe had a week's notice. Elsewhere, maybe you had 2 weeks' notice. So Minidoka is one of these concentration camps, call it what you want. There are many ways that it has been described. If you read and understand what the people who were there say it was more like a concentration camp because they could not leave. They could not leave. They were incarcerated.
Right, right. Um, the book that I read, I believe it was called Under the Mountain. I'll have to look that up, and I'll clarify that on the blog. But these families that I read about, they were all in Hawaii. There were a lot of Japanese American people that were living in Hawaii. Many of them citizens, many of them what I would consider probably naturalized citizens that had come over from Japan, or some that were still from Japan and were there working. But a lot of them citizens that had lived there for years, businesses, houses, owned houses. And I know you mentioned that some of them had notice. I think there are a lot of people that really had no notice.
Yeah.
And from what I read there and the little bit that I've read about Minidoka is a lot of times it was always the man of the family first that was taken, arrested, and taken away, and then the family would have maybe a day or a week or whatever to gather whatever they could and join them.
Yeah, because there was a lot having to do, like they would get forcibly removed from their homes and moved into like a detention center to eventually then have to take a train ride to wherever they were going. And there were many of these camps located in the United States, camps, concentration, these places, internment centers, that these folks were taken to. Minidoka is obviously just the one that's in Idaho that they were taken to. What was interesting is that there was no one that was exempt. If you had any Japanese heritage in you, you were not exempt. If you were in an orphanage and you were a child, you were taken. If you were in the hospital, you were taken. If you had any connection in that way to Japan, you were being taken away. It did not matter if you were a U.S. citizen, a legal U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and I did read a statistic that I believe I read that 62% of the people in those internment camps were actually American citizens, born here in the United States. But they were, 62% of them were actual citizens in the internment camps.
Yeah. And you figure there was about 120,000 folks that were removed from their homes. This is done like just not long after we had declared war on Japan. And so the swiftness by which it happened, I think, is what caught everybody off guard. I mean, the Japanese Americans that were living on the West Coast, many were so successful, and they were successful because when, if you go back to when Japanese really started migrating over to the United States, they started first like working in the farmlands and, doing the laborer jobs, but they were smart in terms of they saved their money and figured out how to then create businesses in their neighborhoods.
Right.
And unfortunately, people felt threatened by that. So many of the white community were threatened by the successfulness of the Japanese Americans, and there was some backlash that happened with that as well.
Right. Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
So that when Pearl Harbor happens, this hysteria breaks out that everybody who's of any kind of Japanese descent is bad and must be taken away from this area that's on the West Coast. So the Secretary of War could create this military area that they could exclude people, and they were excluding Japanese Americans.
Now, if I remember correctly, was it Franklin Delano, FDR, that signed that? And did I remember something in the book, and I remember reading a little bit of something. Eleanor was opposed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was kind of a riff on this. She did not want him to sign it, but he signed it because all his advisors were like, "We have to do this." And I understand, in the middle of this unprecedented attack on United States soil, something completely unexpected. I understand that there had to have been an inordinate amount of fear. I completely get that. What I have a hard time coming to terms with is that if you've known this person here for 30,
Mm-hmm.
40 years, they've been your neighbor, you've gone to their store, you buy your groceries from them, you maybe have barbecues or picnics or whatever, you share meals with them,
Right.
to believe that all of a sudden that this person that you know so well could be detrimental to your country, it doesn't, it just doesn't, I can't make it jive.
Yeah, I can't. It's like make it make sense,
Yeah.
right? And again, you go back to the hysteria that broke out after the United States had been attacked, and we had never been attacked. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
really before, right? But there's so much when we look to 9/11 and what happened at 9/11, and fearing that the same thing starts to happen, is that we start to fear groups of people
Right.
that are not like us. Although we live amongst all sorts of people every day.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like what causes this to happen, and how do we find a way to avoid that happening?
Right. Right. Well, which is why we're doing this.
It's exactly why we're doing this, to talk about how this occurred, that it occurred, and just the amazing fortitude of the Japanese Americans that were incarcerated. So again, kind of going back to Minidoka, it's situated on, I want to say it's about like 33 acres of land, and there's a whole lot more land, but of what they're actually building on is a much smaller thing. But the problem is that when they, took the Japanese Americans first to the detention centers, and then, took them over to Minidoka, or to whichever internment camp they were going to, it's like you could only take what you could carry. And so there was like a list of things for them to take. So it was like, make sure you have your own toiletries for every single person, your own dishes for every single person. And, like there's like a list of things they wanted you to bring. It's like, but like if you had kids, like you only had like a mom and dad trying to make sure that they could
Right.
carry everything. So it's like, how much could you actually go with that you could carry with you? So they were having to sell their property because they didn't know where they were going. They didn't know how long they were going to be gone. They were selling their stuff for like, pennies on a dollar.
Yeah. There, the film on the NPS site that you can view either on YouTube or on the NPS site, or if you're visiting there, I believe it's showing there at the site.
At the visitor center.
But one of the things that I remembered was somebody, a child, I guess, who had been born there or lived there as a child, talking about how when they were sent away from their home, that the father had just bought
Oh yeah.
a radio. Back in the day, remember
A General
those big,
Electric radio.
yeah, giant radios that everybody sat around, and that he had spent like $100 on this radio, which at that time must have been an astronomical amount of money
Right.
for his family, and they couldn't take it. And the father ended up having to sell it. He sold it to one of the police officers for $5.
$5.
$5. Yeah, they could not take everything with them. There was just no way.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom how this was all going down, knowing that you had neighbors being taken away and businesses all of a sudden having to start boarding up because they weren't going to be there any longer, and then just the hate that was being thrown at these folks for no reason. They hadn't done anything. These Japanese Americans had been law-abiding citizens doing their thing. And then they get taken away, and all of a sudden people flip a switch and, don't like them anymore.
Yeah.
So, but, as they moved into Minidoka, they arrived, and I think there was like a dust storm because, again, there's nothing out there. The barracks that they were building, they had not finished building. Basically, it's tar paper, green wood, tar paper, and really did nothing to keep the wind or the dust out. Particularly green wood, it would shrink, so there were gaping holes, and trying to stay warm, or it was unbearably hot. I mean, just pick it, right?
Some people were put in horse stalls.
Well, those were in the detention centers.
Oh, were they the
Yeah,
detention centers?
so
Okay.
they were housing the Japanese Americans before they were taken to the internment centers. They were housing them first in these detention centers, which were like old racetracks.
Ah, okay.
And so they were housed in horse stalls that they said they cleaned. But I don't know how you ever really get rid of that smell, which that's what people remember a lot of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you kind of had an inkling of what it was going to be like when you got to Minidoka. And they said, like, in Minidoka, like, if it rained, there was just mud everywhere. If it was a dust storm, there was just dust everywhere. If it was cold, then it was just cold. I mean, it just was everywhere. It's like you couldn't really avoid anything because even the barracks that they built were not enough to really protect you from a whole lot.
But I will say that from what I've read and the little bit that I've seen, they did their best to make a life in this
Oh my
in these
gosh.
camps.
I am just I'm blown away by again the strength that they exhibited. They said that I can't remember the Japanese word for it, but bearing the unbearable, and how they went about doing that. Now you have to think about because like if you go to Minidoka, they don't have all the barracks that are out there. Now again, this camp had like 13,000 Japanese Americans that went through it. I think at the most at any given time it might have been about 10,000. When they show up, it's not even completely built, right? Not even completely built. They don't have restroom facilities or showers and all that stuff, right? They're still building this stuff, right? But you have to think about, they had these it was made up of like 44 blocks. Each block had like 12 barracks. Each barracks had like 6 living areas. You had laundry facilities, bathrooms, and a mess hall. So imagine living with a bunch of people in a barracks like as if you were in the army or something, right? In fact, very close quarters.
No
quarters.
privacy.
Yeah, none. They found ways to try to have privacy, right, by hanging blankets or what have you. But then they started to really figure out how could they contribute to this community. Now this became their new community. How do they strengthen and embrace this community and endure what they're having to endure to bear the unbearable? And it's fascinating to think that they had an internal police group.
Yes.
They had an internal fire department. They had they even sold stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they even had like little stores and stuff.
Yeah.
Because they had a school. They had schools.
The cooks recruited anybody that had restaurant experience to do the cooking.
Which is fascinating because these people had come from successful lives, right? They had been living full lives. And it's not like they just forgot that when they came over to Minidoka. And so that they reached back and said, I still know how to do these things and I'm going to do this to better this community.
Right.
It was just amazing to see how much was done. And then one of the neat things, because they still have kind of the outline of where the baseball field is, they did baseball.
Yes.
And which was really kind of cool. That was
Didn't
really.
they play against outside teams?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So outside teams would come in and they would beat them handily. So it was that community type of activity that people could get together and kind of celebrate, if you will,
right.
During those moments.
Yeah, yeah. And they had a Boy Scout troop too, I think.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, it was like they were really creating, not to as successful as they were on the outside, right? But they were trying to create this community for themselves, recognizing where they were at, not knowing when that was going to end,
right,
or how it was going to end, or what was going to happen with them,
right.
But yeah, they really they created that, they lived that, they supported one another, and they were able to persevere through it. So as with anything that's established, you have to figure out, okay, so how are we going to unestablish it or de-establish it, right? And it's like, okay, you can't just all of a sudden let these people just go. I mean, they all got train rides to get there. They all came from a detention center, which, everybody kind of fed into and everything. So they had to figure out how they were going to start getting people out of the incarceration. And so Yeah. So FDR announced the formation of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was a segregated Japanese American unit, which is great and wonderful, sure. But at the same time, they were also asked to fill out these, what they called loyalty. What were they called? Loyalty.
They were like, it was like
Loyalty
an
questionnaire?
application or questionnaire,
Yeah.
interview sheet or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and there were two questions on there that the Japanese Americans had issues with. One of them was, are you willing to fight basically in the military for the United States? And two, will you disavow the Japanese emperor?
Regime or whatever.
Yeah, regime, yeah. And they took issues with that because they're having to disavow something they never avowed in the first place because they were Americans, right? They're Japanese Americans, they're Americans. And then it's like, okay, you want me to go serve in your military, you have me incarcerated, and you want me to go fight for you? It's like, it just...
It's a lot of nerve.
That's a good way to put it, Monica.
Got a lot of nerve.
It was a lot of nerve. But a lot of men signed up.
They wanted to prove their allegiance. They wanted to prove... It wasn't... I don't think, from what I've read, the book I read and what I've read about this, they weren't signing up to get out of the internment camps.
Exactly.
They were signing up because they wanted to prove their allegiance to the United States.
Yep.
They wanted to prove that they were good citizens, that they were solid citizens, that they were loyal. That's why they signed up. They didn't sign up because they saw it as a
ticket out.
Get out free ticket.
Yeah, no.
They're still leaving their families behind.
Yeah, and it was hard for families that had sons that were going off to go fight because, they knew that there was a risk of losing them in battle.
Yes.
And that very much could easily happen and did happen. And in fact, when you go to Minidoka and you drive in, they have what is called an honor roll, and it's like a 3-panel wooden sign that has a wooden carved eagle at the top, and it has the name of all of the people who had volunteered to join the military service. It is really cool. It's a really cool sign. The original sign, we don't know what happened to it. It has been recreated because there had been a picture of it, so it has been recreated, and that's what you see there. So take some time to take a look at that.
There were some young men, and one in particular, which was highlighted in the book I read, which I believe, like I said, is Fire Under the Mountain. And he was one of the ones that refused to check that he would disavow the Japanese regime because his argument was, I have never avowed, or vowed to them. I have never, I don't represent them. I never knew anything about them. I was not spies for them. How can I disavow something that I was never a part of? So he refused to sign it. And his story is very, very interesting. I'll put, like I said, I will put that book on the blog.
Yeah, what's interesting, though, is that if you did not say yes to that...
You were incarcerated, yeah.
You were taken away and put in a maximum security prison in California.
So, you didn't do anything.
You didn't do a thing. Yeah, but you were already incarcerated.
You were already incarcerated. Now you're worse incarcerated.
It's worse incarceration. Yeah, so... So as they were winding this down, and... now it's like, okay, the war is over and now it's time to say, okay, we've got to close this up. Like, how do we go about doing that? And the sad part, at least I thought, is they were basically given, I think, like $25 and a train ticket to leave.
Yeah.
So,
but before we go there, if I'm not mistaken, that group, the Japanese, and I don't know military terms, battalion troops, whatever.
That's right, yes.
They were the highest commended...
the most decorated military unit in the military, in the United States military.
And they had nothing. When they went in there, they weren't even given the basic gear that every other soldier got. They got the ragtag crap from the back. Excuse me. And they still went out there and they fought the fight. And I can't imagine, Susan, what it would be like to go face to face with a soldier who looks like you.
Yeah.
To have the courage and the fortitude to fight that, just Floors me.
For a country who just incarcerated my entire
That's
family.
right. Just floors me. It floors me.
Yeah. But yeah, they were the most decorated unit in American military history. So that is pretty doggone significant. So,
Heck yeah.
but yeah, so then it became time that's like, okay, we've got to, let these people out. So here's your $25. Here's a train ticket. Go and rebuild your life. Go forth. It's like, but how do you just go back and do that? So they go back to their communities. They're not always just welcome back into their communities because people are still
angry.
And
yeah. Rightfully so. I mean, sure, you're still rightfully angry at the Japanese.
Yes.
Who came in and just bombed the crap out of you. Sorry.
The crap.
Yeah. I understand. Yes, yep. You have every right to be angry. But the people that are coming back are not those people.
Right. Yeah, so it was closed in October of 1945. Everybody's kind of dispersed. And it was about rebuilding their lives. And some very successful men, the best they could do then is become a janitor. And it's like their whole lives were basically taken from them for this, couple of year period.
We talked in the Maggie Walker episode about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about, going to my grandma's house and it being bigger than it was when I got to be an adult. And how we look at things and everything that we see is shaped by our experiences. And I was reading, and this is another book that I will put in the blog. It's called A Train to Crystal City, and it is by Jan Jarboe. And there was an internment camp in Crystal City, Texas, which I did not know that until I read this book about Fire in the Mountain. I had no idea that a few hours from San Antonio, there was an internment camp. The trains would bring in high-value prisoners that were German and Japanese to exchange for Americans that were being held prisoners somewhere else.
Yep.
And so when she went to interview some of these people that were interred there in Crystal City, there was a young man who, I guess he was an older man when she was interviewing him, but he was a young boy when he was living there. And he was walking one day with his father, and his father, he happened to see where the director of this internment camp was living outside of the camp. And that the young boy asked his father, he said, Dad, why does he live behind that wire fence? Why is he fenced in? And the dad had to explain to him that the man out there wasn't the one that was fenced in. They were.
Yep.
But his perspective was that of, which makes me very sad. This was his home, and
the innocence of a child.
The innocence of a child. He's thinking he's the one that's free.
Mm-hmm.
It just floored me. It floored me.
Yeah, perspective, right? So, yes, they went back looking to try to rebuild their lives. And, there was a commission that was started, I think it was under Jimmy Carter, to look into what had happened and why this had happened. And it basically came out that it was mass hysteria, racial divide, as to why this happened the way that it did, why it was necessary to have these camps. And, I think still relative even today. It's like the mass hysteria that can happen can drive us to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
It was under Ronald Reagan, though, that the American Civil Liberties Act was passed. And that's where the reparations come into play. And I think it was $20,000 for the survivors if they had survived. But, I mean, think about that. That's, how many years later some of them have died. But
anybody who lived at the camp, right, got $20,000.
Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of those people were already dead.
Yeah. So it's something, and it's like they say in the film, that it wasn't about the money. It was about the United States saying, and Ronald Reagan saying, we made a mistake.
Yeah, we were wrong.
We're sorry, we made a mistake. Yeah. So with that, looking at Minidoka, absolutely go out there. It is a wonderful place to go and learn about this part of history. And there is a self-guided walking tour that you can take, because they do have some buildings that are out there that are like kind of the barracks and stuff. It's about 1.6 miles. It's a gravel walking trail. It's fairly even, but it's gravel, so take your sticks maybe if you're a little uneven on that kind of uneven walking terrain.
Um, I was thinking of something now. I can't remember what I was going to ask. But are there national historic sites for other internment camps?
Oh yeah, there are.
So are they all like national historic sites, or?
I don't know if they all are, but there are several.
Because there was one in, where did they do the testing of the bomb?
Oh, those are all. There's 3 different ones, and those are all MPS sites.
And they were all right there within where where all the bombs were being tested. Or one of them was. That's where the gentleman from Hawaii, the book that I read, that's where his family was sent.
Yeah.
Yeah, like no regard for these people in this camp while they're testing these bombs.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, there are other places to visit.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so but you can get out and you can walk around. You can see where the baseball field was. You can see how these barracks were all lined up. They have a visitor center there. Plenty for you to read along the way. They have a lot of the signboards that are out there that offer the stories. It's pretty cool to read the stories of the people who were there, how they lived, how they made this a community, and how they survived this incarceration. So I would definitely encourage you to go to the visitor center. Now, they have very limited hours of when you can go into the visitor center. But if you can get there on a day that the visitor center is open, absolutely go in. They have really great display information and stories and everything about when it was happening, when they were being taken from the West Coast, when they were being put into detention centers, then to eventually going into these incarceration centers. It's just a lot of great information, and we'll share some of those pictures with you too.
I remember one more thing. There is the families of the survivors. They do a pilgrimage
every year,
where they go and they honor the site and honor the families and the people that live there.
Which is really kind of cool, because they can kind of describe what is in these barracks. Because when you do your self-guided tour, you don't go into the barracks, but on that annual one that they do, they are able to go into the barracks, and you can see kind of how it was that they lived there.
Yeah.
So again, I encourage, if you're ever in the Idaho area, you should go to Minidoka.
Yeah, I'll put it on my list.
There you go. It could be on your way to somewhere else. It doesn't matter. You need to make time to stop here and spend a few hours here.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, well, anything else there, Monica?
I don't think so. If you found any of this interesting, you want to know more, put it in the comments. We would appreciate if you liked us, subscribed to us, and maybe click the notification bell.
Ring.
But we're not ringing bells, but we're notification bells. And hopefully we'll have something out for you next Thursday at 10 a.m.
Next Thursday, 10 a.m. We'll be back at it. And in the meantime, hike your own hike.
Hike your own hike.
All right. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.